Hey, good afternoon, it's Pete from FigLife.com, and today I'm going to take a look at a fig that's called Moscatel Verde. Alright, this is my Moscatel Verde tree. It's my first year tree. I know I got it this year. I think I got it as a cutting and rooted it over the winter. Pretty sure of that. But it's growing well. It's actually got a nice shape to it. A lot of times they'll grow as a single stalk, and then I'll end up having to cut them, and then they branch out after that. But this one actually has branched out nicely on its own, so that's nice. It's producing a lot of fruit here, so that's good to see. I'd say about average growth, but it seems to be very productive. I mean, look at all those fruits on this tree. And it's early September. It's September 6th here. Of course, the growing conditions are not probably normal growing conditions, because I used grow lights to root it, and then I had help from a greenhouse early spring, and that, I do that because that helps me get these to grow and ripen fruit in a single season. So my point there is, September 6th may not be typical of a ripening date for this area, for this tree, but regardless, it's starting to produce fruit now. This one here is almost ripe, and I just picked one that I think is it just ripened, so let's go take a look at that. All right, here's the Moscatel Verde fig. Slightly open eye on this, and it seems like the other figs on that tree have a similar sort of characteristic there. Kind of a light green color to it. It's got a sort of a strange, like bouncy sort of feel to it when you squeeze it. It's sort of like some figs are kind of spongy. This one's not spongy. I wouldn't call it that. I would call it kind of like a bouncy sort of thing. Like when you squeeze a rubber ball and it sort of like pushes back. That's sort of like what this feels like when I squeeze on it. Isbadanage actually has a similar sort of feel to it when you squeeze it, so that's kind of interesting. But this is a Fig du Monde variety, apparently, and he usually has some really good figs, so I'm excited to try this one and see what it tastes like. Let me cut it open. All right, I cut it open, and it looks really juicy on the inside, so that's good to see. And it does actually remind me a lot of Isbadanage when I cut it open, except that Isbadanage, I would expect to see a darker coloring on the inside. It seems to have a light brown sort of pulp to it. This is much lighter. This is like a real light brown, almost like a peachish, almost like a peach color on the inside, but it's really juicy. So that's a good sign. Indicates that this may be a ripe fig and may taste pretty good. So let me try this. All right, it's always exciting to try a new fig for the first time, and you never quite know what you're gonna get, especially one like this where there's not a lot of information out there. You try like Smith is maybe a bad example, but you try a Hardy Chicago type for the first time. It's not quite that same level of excitement, because many people have tried it. But I haven't seen a lot of reviews on this one. I know there's a few people growing it and selling it, but here it goes. So this is Moscatel Verde. Okay. So it is real juicy. Sort of like a light sweetness with a creamy sort of flavor to it. Yeah. So it's not super sweet for me, but it's really creamy. That's really, really interesting. It's almost like eating, like when you eat some oatmeal, like a bowl of oatmeal, and it has that creamy sort of that's really good. It's so creamy. Well, that's what this reminds me of. It reminds me of eating like that oatmeal and having the creamy sort of texture. It's really, really a nice texture. But I imagine that the flavor on this will develop a little bit more because there's not a lot of flavor there right now. It's just a sweet flavor for me, I think. But what's unique about this, or kind of unique about this, is the creaminess. Yeah, just real creamy. That's the sort of takeaway for me. It is sweet and it is good, but you know, being the first fig off a first-year tree, a lot of times flavors will develop a little bit more. So there will probably end up being a little more flavor in that as the tree matures, and maybe even later in the season. Who knows? But my initial takeaway is just surprised at how creamy that is. And you know, before I cut it open, let me take a drink. Before I cut it open, I remarked about how it felt similar to me to Isbat en Nage. And I'm not saying this is the same fig as Isbat en Nage, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I think that's really interesting because that creaminess, that creamy sort of texture or almost flavor to it is something that is also kind of unique to Isbat en Nage. Isbat en Nage has that same sort of quality of a creamy sort of flavor. Isbat en Nage, I mean, there's differences. Isbat en Nage has kind of a banana sort of flavor to it, or it can, if you can get it to ripen, which it's a little finicky, right? Like, not all my Isbat en Nage figs are ripening properly. But in any case, this also has that creamy sort of quality to it, and it had that sort of like bouncy, like rubbery sort of feel to the fig. So it's just interesting that there's those connections there, both in the flavor and then also in the texture of the fig when you squeeze it. So just kind of an interesting side note on that. But yeah, that was Moscatel Verde. Really interesting fig, really, and especially if the flavors end up coming out a little bit more later on. I mean, that could be a really for somebody looking for something a little different, that could be a good fig to get. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe and check out my website, www.figlife.com.